The shadiest corner of your yard, the one you call useless, grew the most valuable crops on the old farms. Most gardeners see shade and think, no sun, no garden, but these crops don't want full sun. Some won't survive it. Your shady corner isn't a problem, it's an unplanted bed. Today I'll give you 10 crops that love shade, what each one is worth, and the one that sells for more per dried pound than anything you could plant out in the open. That one goes last, because it takes the longest to earn, and because my grandfather planted it. But I'm going to give you something the lists leave out. A map. Shade is not one thing. There is deep shade under a closed canopy. There is dappled shade where the light comes through broken. And there is the morning sun edge, where the sun reaches you until noon and then lets go. Every crop on this list belongs to one of those three. Putting the right plant in the wrong shade is the single reason most people decide nothing grows back there. The Amish never had a problem corner. We didn't call it landscaping. We called it the woodlot, and it was production ground, planned, planted, and harvested like any field out front. Nobody guessed. If you've got a corner like that, subscribe before we start. I put out one of these every week. And the next one is the ground you've already got, not the ground you wish you had. First, why any of this works. Every plant on this list evolved on a forest floor, not beside a forest, under one. For as long as these species have existed, the light reaching them was already filtered through 40 feet of leaves. So they built themselves for it, wider, thinner leaves to catch what little comes down, and a tolerance for cool, damp, slow-draining ground that would rot a tomato at the root. Put a plant like that in full sun and you are not being generous with it. You are burning it. Now the map. 3 layers, and you can read all 3 off your own yard this afternoon. Deep shade, under a closed canopy or the north face of a building, 2 hours of direct sun or less. Most people write this ground off completely. It is the most valuable layer on the list. Dappled shade. Under high, open hardwoods, the light comes through broken and moving all day. This is the woodlot proper, and it grows the most crops of the 3. And the morning sun edge. The strip that catches sun until about noon and then goes into shadow. 3 to 4 hours of direct light. Nearly every leafy green you already eat will grow there, better there than in the open, and I'll show you why. Deep dappled edge. Every crop from here on gets its layer, and by the end you'll have the whole map filled in. Number 1, ramps. Start with the one that makes people sit up. At a specialty market, ramps run $16 to $30 a pound. In the hollows where they come up thick, you can buy the same plant for $2 to $5. The gap is the whole story. Almost nobody grows them. They're dug wild, and the wild supply is thinning. Ramps are a dappled shade crop, and the reason is the prettiest trick in the woods. A ramp is a spring ephemeral. It comes up while the trees overhead are still bare, does an entire year's work in about 6 weeks of bright spring light, and dies back to the ground before the canopy closes over it. It isn't tolerating shade, it's timing it. That's why they thrive under maple and beech and poplar, and sulk in an open field where the summer sun bakes ground that's meant to stay cool and damp through June. Here's what the price tags don't tell you. A ramp seed can take 2 years just to germinate, and 5 to 7 years to make a bulb worth pulling. You plant them in fall in leaf mold on a north or east slope, and then you leave them be. My grandfather's patch was older than he was. That is not a crop you harvest, it's a crop you inherit. Number 2, mushrooms on logs. Deep shade, the darkest ground you own, and the only crop here that doesn't need soil at all. Shiitake have been grown on cut hardwood logs in Japanese forests for centuries, and the method has barely changed because it barely needs to. You cut a fresh oak log about a hand's width thick, drill it, drive in plug spawn, seal the holes with wax, and stack the logs in the shade out of the wind. Then you wait a year while the fungus takes the wood. After that, extension trials put a log at roughly 1.5 pounds of mushrooms a year, and a single inoculation keeps producing for 4 to 5 years. White oak group is the wood you want. It rots slowly, so it feeds the mushroom longer. Understand what that means for the corner we're talking about. It needs shade and it needs shelter from wind, which is exactly what a dark corner already is. It needs almost no ground, and the raw material is the tree you took down last winter and cut for firewood. The old farms never had a brush pile that wasn't going to become something. This is what a woodpile does when you give it a year. Number 3, spinach. Now the easy one, and the one most people get backwards. Spinach does not need full sun. It needs 3 to 4 hours of direct light, and it does noticeably better with the rest of the day in shade. Put it on the morning sun edge sun until noon, shadow after, and you'll cut from it for weeks longer than the person growing it out in the open. Here's the mechanism. Spinach bolts, shoots up a flower stalk and turns bitter when it gets hot and the days get long. Every hour of afternoon sun you spare it is an hour it isn't being pushed toward that. Shade doesn't stunt spinach. It buys you time. So the corner that's too shady for vegetables is, for spinach, simply a longer season. Same seed, same water, more harvest. There is no trick and no special variety. There's just a bed most people refuse to use. 6 weeks from seed to the first cutting. If you plant nothing else off this list, plant this one, because it will prove the whole idea to you before the summer's out. Number 4, miner's lettuce. If spinach is the easy win on the edge, this is the easy win in the dark. Miner's lettuce will grow in full shade, deep woodland shade, the kind where nothing else you've tried has taken. It's a small, round-leafed green, mild and slightly sweet, and it got its name from the miners who ate it during the gold rush when they had nothing green to eat at all. 2 things you need to know honestly. It's an annual, not a perennial, so it doesn't come back from the root, and it self-seeds so freely that in practice it does come back anyway, year after year, spreading itself across the shady ground you gave it. Some people call that invasive. In a corner you weren't using, I call it doing the work for you. It's a cool season plant, so it runs when everything else is finished, late fall, through mild winters and into early spring. Which means for a stretch of the year when the rest of your garden is bare dirt, the darkest corner is the only part of your place still feeding you. Sow it once in fall and then stop thinking about it. That's the entire instruction. Number 5, sorrel. The perennial nobody replants. Sorrel is a hardy perennial green with a sharp, lemony bite to the leaf. It sits on the edge or in dappled shade, and once it's established it comes back every single spring on its own, for years from the same root. You cut it and it comes again. Cut it, it comes again. In a mild winter you'll still be pulling leaves in the middle of the season when there's nothing else growing. Now, why does a plant like that almost never show up in a garden? Because it isn't sold as a vegetable, it's sold as a herb, in a small pot, and people put one in a border and forget it. Grow a row of it in shade and it behaves like the most reliable green you own. There's a lesson in it that goes past sorrel. The old kitchen gardens leaned hard on perennials, plants you put in once and harvest for a decade, because labor was the scarce thing, not seed. Every year you replant an annual, you are paying that cost again. Sorrel is the shade corner's version of a good tool. buy it once. Number 6. Currants and Gooseberries. Here's one with a story most gardeners have never heard, and you need the story before you plant it. Currants and gooseberries are woodland fruit. The wild ones grow in shade, in the tangle at the edge of the trees, and the cultivated ones will carry a real crop in dappled light where most fruit refuses. So why is nobody growing them? Because for most of the last century in this country it was illegal. Currants and gooseberries, the whole ribs family, are the alternate host of white pine blister rust. The fungus needs both the pine and the currant to complete its life cycle, so to protect the white pine timber industry, the federal government banned growing them outright. That ban wasn't lifted until 1966, and a generation of American gardeners simply grew up never having seen the plant. Now the careful part in this matters. When the federal ban lifted, the states took it over and the rules still differ. Delaware, New Jersey, and North Carolina prohibit bringing in or growing any currants or gooseberries. Massachusetts bans black currant and leaves red and white to individual towns. Maine bans European black currant statewide and quarantines the whole family across 9 counties. So check your state before you order a plant, and where they are allowed, ask for rust-immune varieties by name. A fruit bush that carries in shade, and the reason you've never seen one is a law. That's the woodlot's history in one plant. Number 7. Groundnuts. I want to be precise about this one, because it's the plant that's most often shown wrong. The groundnut here is Apios americana. It is not a peanut. Now both are legumes, both in the bean family, so anyone who tells you they're unrelated is also guessing. The real difference is this. The peanut is an annual from South America that pushes its own flower stalk into the soil and ripens its pod underground. The groundnut is a native perennial vine that climbs 10 feet and strings a chain of tubers along its roots, like beads on a cord. Different plant, different continent, different organ entirely. Dig one and you'll see it immediately. Not a pod, a string of small potatoes on a root. It was a staple food here long before the potato arrived. A genuine Native American food crop across the eastern half of the continent. And there's evidence the Shawnee grew it deliberately alongside corn and squash. It carries about 3 times the protein of a potato, and because it's a legume, it fixes nitrogen. It feeds the soil it's standing in while you're waiting on it. Dappled edge is its layer. It wants something to climb and it wants moisture. Give it a fence at the tree line and it will take the corner over. The most nutritious thing on this list, and it was here first. Number 8. Pawpaw. The largest fruit native to North America, and the only real fruit tree on this list that will genuinely handle shade. The taste is the reason people chase it, custard, banana, mango, all at once, off a tree that grows wild in Ohio bottomland. Now the shade part told straight, because this is where most videos overstate it. Pawpaw is an understory tree. A young pawpaw seedling is genuinely sun-sensitive and wants shade for its first years. That's how the woods raises it under something taller. A mature tree will take more light and will fruit better for it. So the honest instruction is, dappled shade at the edge of the canopy and let it grow up into whatever light it finds. Not the darkest corner, the bright half of the woodlot. It's reliably hardy to zone 5. About 15 below, so it handles more winter than most people expect from a fruit that tastes tropical. And the one rule that decides whether you ever eat one, plant 2. Pawpaw can't pollinate itself, and 2 grafted trees of the same variety are clones, they won't do it either. You need 2 genetically different trees, 2 seedlings or 2 named varieties. Plant one and you'll wait years for nothing. For the heritage, in September of 1806, Lewis and Clark's party came down the Missouri with the food gone. Clark wrote that they were subsisting on pawpaws. They ate their way home on this fruit. It was worth planting then. It's worth planting now. Number 9. Red mulberry. Plant the right mulberry, and this is the least work per pound of fruit of anything here. Say red mulberry specifically, Morus rubra, the native one. It's the mulberry you find growing wild in shaded woodland and along creek banks, and it tolerates partial shade the way the others don't. I'll be straight about the trade-off, because the shade lists never are. A mulberry fruit's best in full sun. In partial shade you still get a crop, a real one, a heavy one, but it's smaller than the same tree in the open. So mulberry goes on the edge layer, not the deep one. Give it the brightest shade you've got. What you get for that is a tree that starts bearing young, grows fast, and then drops fruit for weeks. More than you can pick every year with no spraying, no pruning schedule, and no attention at all. That's exactly why the old farmsteads had won. It wasn't planted for the kitchen. It was planted where the poultry ran, so the birds fed themselves off the drop for a month of the summer, and whatever the family wanted, it took first. One tree, two harvests, no labor. If you have a corner too shaded and too rough to bother with, that is a mulberry's whole requirement. Number 10. Ginseng. Now the one you came for. American ginseng is the highest value plant crop you can put in a shaded American woodlot, and the numbers are not close. Ohio State Extension puts wild and wild simulated root at $350 to $500 a dried pound over the past decade. Field grown, out in the open under artificial shade, $10 to $25. Same species. The difference is where it grew and how long it took. And it is genuinely a shade obligate. Ginseng wants 70 to 90% canopy shade on a north or east-facing slope in cool, well-drained woods. It is not a plant you can talk into a sunny bed. Your deep shade layer is the only place it will ever work. The old farms knew the ground by its company. Where you find golden seal, bloodroot, trillium, wild ginger, jack-in-the-pulpit, and ferns, ginseng belongs. Those plants want the same woods. Tulip poplar, sugar maple, and black walnut overhead say the same thing. You don't test that ground first. You read it. The history is the trade, and it's older than the country. A French missionary in Canada identified American ginseng in 1716, working from what Mohawk women told him. Within a generation, colonists were shipping it to China by the ton, because Chinese ginseng had been dug nearly to nothing and the American root would substitute. Through the 1700s it was mountain money. Daniel Boone traded in it. They called it green gold. Now the patience, honestly. Wild simulated ginseng, seed scattered in real woods and left alone, typically needs at least 7 years, commonly 7 to 12, before the root is worth digging. Woods cultivated in prepared beds, 6 to 8. And the law exactly, because people get this wrong and it costs them. Planting ginseng on ground you own is legal. Digging wild ginseng is regulated state by state. Around 20 states permit it under conditions. Generally a September to December season, written permission from the landowner. Plants at least 5 years old with 3 prongs, and the berries replanted where the plant came out. Selling it is regulated separately again, with dealer permits, and export runs through federal wildlife authorities because ginseng is an internationally protected species. At least one state requires a permit even for cultivated plants. So before you plant or sell, call your own state, not the internet, your state. 7 years is a long time. It's also the exact reason it's still worth what it's worth. 4 ways people lose this corner. I'd rather you hear them from me than learn them. First, putting sun crops in shade and blaming the soil. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, corn, none of them belong on this list, and no amount of compost fixes it. When they fail back there, people conclude the ground is bad, and then they stop planting anything at all. The ground was fine. The plant was wrong. Second, and this one I want to correct directly. You'll hear a rule for harvesting ramps. Take 1/3 and leave 2/3. It gets repeated constantly. It is not the guidance, and it doesn't hold. Remember the math: 2 years to germinate, 5 to 7 to make a bulb. Take 1/3 every year off a stand, rebuilding that slowly, and you will empty it inside a decade. Conservation groups say 5 to 10% of a patch, and the better practice is to take 1 leaf from each plant and leave the bulb and roots entirely. You get your ramps. The patch survives you. Third, expecting ginseng money on a garden schedule. It is a 7-year crop minimum. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling seed. Fourth, 2 identification points that are worth real money and, in one case, real safety. Ramps have toxic lookalikes. Lily of the valley and false hellebore grow in the same woods and will hurt you. Crush a leaf. Ramps smell of onion. The lookalikes never do. If it doesn't smell, don't eat it. And on the other end, the wasabi people plant after seeing a price tag. Real wasabi runs $100 to $160 a pound because it is genuinely difficult. Roughly 95% of what's served outside Japan is horseradish, mustard, and green dye. That's why I left it off this list. So here's the map filled in. Deep shade, the corner you'd written off completely. Mushrooms on logs, miner's lettuce, and ginseng. The darkest ground you own carries the highest value crop on the list. Dappled shade, the open woodlot. Ramps, currants and gooseberries, groundnuts, and pawpaw. The morning sun edge. Spinach, sorrel, and red mulberry. 10 crops, 3 layers, and not one of them wants the ground you're already fighting over out front. Now think about what that corner actually produces. Greens through the winter when the rest of the garden is bare. Mushrooms off firewood for 5 years from one afternoon's work. A fruit tree the continent's own explorers ate their way home on. A fruit bush that was against the law to grow. And in the deep shade, slowly, a root that has been mountain money for 300 years. None of that is landscaping, that's a farm. And that's the part I most want you to take. The old places didn't have wasted ground because they didn't look at ground and ask what it couldn't do. They read what it already was: the slope, the light, the damp, the company it kept, and they planted the thing that wanted to be there. Shade wasn't a problem they'd failed to solve. It was a layer, and it had its own crops, and every one of them was already growing somewhere in the woods behind the barn. There is no useless ground. There is only ground nobody taught you to read. If this was worth your time, subscribe. That's the whole thanks I need. And go watch the one on keeping pests off what you grow, because the corner we just planted is going to need it. The store was never part of the plan.